Hello, everyone. It's really great to have you with us for this In Perspective Roundtable with the Straits Times on Singapore's EV journey. As you may very well know, Singapore is at the forefront of this EV journey, not only in Southeast Asia, but it is a country to be watched across the world as well. 2025 data shows that EVs made up for a record 45% of new car registrations here. And the data for the last 3 months shows that the numbers have actually been increasing, which is not entirely a surprise given the state of the world, and there are concerns about how oil prices will go. Now, Singapore has set a very ambitious goal, the Green Plan 2030, as part of which all new car and taxi registrations should be cleaner energy vehicles by that year. And by 2040, we are hoping that all ICE vehicles are also phased out. But, getting there is going to mean addressing a lot of issues. These deal with infrastructure, investments, batteries. We have a fabulous panel here to discuss all these issues. Let me begin by introducing each one of them to you first. On my left is Lam Wee Shann, Deputy Chief Executive Tech at LTA, who oversees the technology cluster at LTA, and that includes road operations, IT, cybersecurity, autonomous vehicles, EVs, and a lot more. You've got a big portfolio. Next, we have James Ang. He's a leading figure in Southeast Asia's electric mobility journey. James heads BYD Singapore as well as BYD Philippines as its managing director, and he tells me he's also a very passionate jogger. Now, given BYD's leading position here, we do have a few questions about what's coming for consumers in Singapore. Many of you might already know Julian Kho, given his Instagram channel and all the work he's doing at Sgcarmart, which is Singapore's leading automotive platform. I still remember an article that Julian wrote way back in 2022, where he talks about how every time he buys a new car, it excites him so much, he feels like a brand new person. Next, we have Dr. Tobias, who is with TUMCREATE, who's been leading numerous projects in the areas of electric mobility, sustainability, and renewable energies. Would you just tell us very briefly, what does TUMCREATE do in Singapore?
TUMCREATE is one of the research organizations funded by the National Research Foundation under the CREATE program. And we cover a lot of research from food sciences, health topics, and also energy and power systems, which is the part that I'm leading.
And last but definitely not least, we have Tyron Tan, who is an avid automotive enthusiast, who is an opportunity catalyst at VoltBridge, a venture that is a knowledge vehicle platform for electrification. As an opportunity catalyst, what do you do, Tyron?
I bring about new opportunities for both, in this case, electrification to take place through educational platforms or even through events or even giving talks to bring about electrification closer to Singapore's goal of 2040 for better emissions and a cleaner country.
I can see you'll have a lot of work to do in the coming years.
Oh, yes.
So let's begin with the panel discussion. So our survey is showing that most people do see EVs as greener and the future, but most don't think Singapore is kind of ready for that mass adoption as yet. What, in your view, is the one thing that needs to be addressed if we are to stay on track for the 2030 green goals? May I start with you, Wee Shann?
Well, first of all, we have, over the last few years, been preparing for the mass adoption. As you said earlier, we see a healthy momentum. Last year, we clocked 45% adoption out of all the new car registration. Mm-hmm. And for the last 2 months, we have been breaking this record, and we are looking at 55% of the new car registration being an electric vehicle. This is an encouraging sign, but if you look at the total vehicle population, we have still some way to go. And indeed, that is where we have to continue our work, whether this is in the area of policy, in the area of battery safety, as well as the charger infrastructure deployment. And I think these are few areas that we have to continue to work hard to continue to help this momentum carry on.
Maybe just to add on, I think your number is correct. As per February, we are talking about 56% going for BEV now. I think many people are getting receptive to BEV, basically because of the battery electric vehicle can give them convenience, good experience, and I think most importantly is talking about the charging stations. Charging station is always a concern about the inconvenience cost to do it charge. But today, I think the government has done a very good job. We are going for 60,000 by 2030. Now we are about 25 to 30,000. That's the way that we should go. So the next step is that how can we as a principal to break through technology to make the charging even faster. So we have some good solutions. Maybe later on, we can elaborate more later.
Julian?
Well, I think as of December 2025, if memory serves correctly, we have about 28,000 charging infrastructure. On the road, there should be about 57,000 EVs to date, thereabouts. If you think about it carefully, if you do the math, it's 2 cars to 1 charging station. To me, that's world class. I think the question right now isn't whether or not I should change to an EV. It's more of what EV I should change to.
Dr. Tobias?
I'm actually quite positive about that. So it surprises me a bit that there's still some, hesitation. Maybe it's just, we have to tell people, don't be afraid. Just drive an EV for a few days and you will see it will not run out of charge within a few hours. You might have to charge only once a week. Singapore is one of the best places. It's small, so range anxiety is not really an issue. There's a COE, it's well managed. As you said, ICE engine vehicles will be phased out.
The biggest issue, I think, from adoption side is everybody's perspective that it takes a long time to charge a car, charge an EV. But now we've got chargers which go up to 480 kilowatts. It doesn't take even a long time. So it's about the next few years about education, about changing the mindset of those people who have been pumping gas for the past in their whole lifetime, and now to just putting a Type 2 charger in. Yeah, and I think that can be done.
Yes, it can be done. And there are concerns as well, but we'll bring those in little later.
Yep.
Wee Shann, if I can ask you, the macro view.
Yes.
So how is LTA thinking about EVs in the context of broader mobility?
For us, we continue to look at providing all different kind of land transport modes to our people. And it's important that we use those land transport modes to facilitate their movements as well as the freight movement. So the focus on having infrastructure to facilitate walking, cycling, continue to expand our public transport network. These continue to be one of the primary focus of our work. And that's why you see us expanding our MRT network. We bring in more bus services. We also continue to build more covered linkway, cycling path, and all those. And so while we continue to embark on this very important focus of bringing active mobility and public transport to our people, we also recognize that land transport actually contribute to a large part of the carbon emission at the national level. We are the third largest emitter. And so we have to do our part. And when we dive in further to look at what are some of the factors or areas of contribution, vehicular movements actually contribute to a large part. And that is why vehicle electrification become an important pillar together with the promotions of using walking, cycling, and the use of public transport as another key pillar to do our part in contributing to the net zero. And that's why in 2020, we make it quite clear and have a policy clarity that we are going into vehicle electrification. And since then, 5-6 years on, we are seeing healthy momentum, as you say. We are not done, obviously, but this is an important focus, as I said, as a way to address our green plan ambition.
Yes. Yeah. But all of what you said also means that we will require a lot more investments in this area. So what is LTA thinking in terms of efforts to build more infrastructure, encourage the private sector to get into this area?
Yes. Well, when we look at vehicle electrifications, we identify 3 key areas which we think are important factors, contributing factors to a successful EV adoption. First, it is policy clarity and how we could use policy to encourage, if anyone need to buy a vehicle, consider cleaner energy vehicles. First, as you mentioned, we state clear rules that, in fact, since last year, we have ceased the new diesel car goods vehicles registration. By 2030, we are looking at only permitting new car registrations which are the cleaner energy vehicles. And we set ambitions that 2040, we would like to convert all to cleaner energy vehicles. So that clarity is important, because if you think of buying a car, and if we look at a COE 10-year cycle, it is not a lot of time. It is 2 cycles, right? And we want to state this ambition early so that people can think about it and understand a bit more. So that's one, policy clarity. And so with that, we introduce policies like the EV early adoption incentives together with the vehicle emission scheme. We see healthy take-up, and that's one. Second is also about infrastructure. At that time, indeed, the number of chargers is quite minimal. I still remember LTA together with EDB were working very closely with Bolare on EV car sharing.
Okay.
And that is to build a very small network of EV chargers. But we recognize that charging infrastructure is an important consideration when one considers whether to buy a battery electric vehicle. And so, instead of waiting for the demand to come in, we lead by deploying the infrastructure. Earlier, we have a commitment that we want to install EV chargers in every HDB car parks. We did that, and we achieved more than 90% coverage by the end of last year. And that comprehensiveness at least assure the EV users that I have a charger nearby. But we are mindful that technology is changing very quickly. And I can share a little bit more later, but we're mindful that that is a baseline. Subsequently, the build-out of the charger network were largely dependent on local demand.
True.
As what Julian mentioned, the ratio is quite healthy. And we also want to make sure that we are always staying ahead, where new technology come in, we can easily adopt and move on. So that is second. The third equally important factor is actually safety. We want to make sure that the commute is a safe one, and that what we have done is we work with academia, industry partners, and we relook at what is the technical reference or basically standards for electric vehicle charging, different type of charging, what are the safe procedures, what are the coverage, and together with it, we update the technical reference 25. In fact, the multi-party is reviewing this, and we are going to roll out a Singapore standard based on that. And that is important because we want to make sure that the charging is done safely, and that this will assure the users that all these are taken care of.
I'm really happy you brought up the whole safety issue, but I want to draw James' attention to another point he just made about incentives to encourage people to go for EVs. Now, in your view, are the COE structures, tax rebates, competitive enough? And is it all in place to encourage mass market adoption?
I cannot complain more already. I think the government is doing a very wonderful job. And we have the subsidy EAI plus VES was in 2024 was 40,000. Add on together, then it dropped by 30,000. Definitely we will assume that there's a drop. But in 2027, it's going to drop to 25,000 from 30 to 25. I think this is perfectly a very nice gradual drop to support the implementations of BEV in Singapore. I think thumbs up for that kind of arrangement. Because if you look at taking reference in China, we also did that in China, doing subsidies for the electric vehicles and also on the gradual mode. And the outcome is marvelous. So today we have a very good outcome, 56% as per February. We have to understand in today's technology of electric vehicle, especially for BYD, let's take a look. Other than that, what kind of total cost of ownership that this BEV can bring forth as compared to that of traditional IC vehicles? So if you look at that, maybe the running cost is definitely going to be saved quite a fair bit. For example, you're running at a week about 60 kilometers a day, for example, to and fro within your work areas. You're talking about another almost $50 saving a week. So that translates into $250. So this is one saving other than the subsidy from the government. Then other than that, maintenance cost by the rule of thumb is half that of the traditional ICE. At the same time, you also enjoy that kind of good experience, that kind of safety, something very different that you can experience from ICE. Actually, the only things that we are looking at is the certain inconvenience cost of getting the infrastructure perfectly support. Because, but if you can manage that well, I don't think that is going to be an issue. Because economical-wise, it's actually proven that there's no reason you should go back to ICE. And more importantly is that moving forward, the technology of BYD is going to solve all these problems pretty soon.
It's really good to hear that a lot of the policy clarity is there. And then, you know, listening to you, I feel that many of the incentives are probably in place.
Yes, it's
But I suppose there are larger issues that do need to be addressed as well. And I'm going to draw Tobias into the conversation now. Let me ask you, if we were to look 10 to 15 years ahead into the future, what does a fully integrated EV system look like for you?
Well, to the users, it would offer maximum convenience, meaning there's charging stations available everywhere, different kinds of buildings, residential, commercial, workplaces, or any car parks. There should be a lot of apps to help them, just to show them where the next chargers are, whether they're occupied or not, regardless of the operator. So this should be standardized. There can also be incentives on when to charge. From a grid perspective, right? We look at when is sufficient energy available, maybe in a car park where there's photovoltaics on top, to have green energy to charge a vehicle and get some incentive from that. Could have some kind of subscription for people who have a very regular travel pattern. You know, they go to work every day and maybe for some leisure. They probably know I have to charge once a week or once every 10 days, and then they could get a reminder and say, okay, just put your car here, everything's fine, it will be charged. Fully integrated does not necessarily mean fully electric. I don't believe that in 10, 15 years everything will be electric. There's still a longer way to go, and not everything might be battery electric, especially when we talk about heavy goods vehicles. There could be other solutions, whether it's hybrid or fuel cells, but time will tell.
So the sector is actually really evolving. There is quite a bit more to come. And some of the things you mentioned are really quite interesting. But in your assessment, Singapore is very much on track to get there, right?
What I like is that things are not being rushed here. You know?
Okay.
Yeah, we started our research on electric mobility some 15 years ago, even before I came to Singapore. And not a lot was happening. I remember we did a project with a taxi operator, and some 8 years later they announced to go fully electric. So it happens. It looks like more of an exponential growth. You know, for a long time nothing happens, or it doesn't seem that there's anything happening. It's all happening in the background. And then suddenly things happen. Or by 2030 the buses are going to be, half of the fleet is going to be electric. Yes. So it's good to move forward at the right pace, not to rush things too far. And I also see that the grid is being expanded, the power grid, because there could be some bottlenecks, particularly in the next few years. I cannot tell, I don't know the grid, but I know that especially with electric buses, we can expect very high charging powers. I believe there's some 12, 13 depots.
40.
And if you charge all the buses at night, even though it's at night, at these 12 points, you might have very high powers of up to maybe 100 megawatts even. And that requires some a robust grid, right?
Indeed.
So this has to be taken care of, that this really works.
I'd like to really ask you to elaborate a little bit more. What more needs to be done so that, you know, the grid capacity is kind of on track to be able to handle these loads? There is this concern about what happens if there are inefficiencies in the system, right? There could be blackouts.
I don't believe there would be blackouts, but let's say you have your app that tells you where the nearest charger is. It could tell you sorry, there's a lot of power demand in this particular point. You might have to drive 1 kilometer further. Of course, for private vehicles that don't have to be charged very often, it is probably not such a big concern. But demand-side management is very important here to say, okay, we have vehicles that have to charge, and we have to charge them at the right time when there's enough power available. This applies, I believe, most to taxis because they don't have the fixed routes like buses, and the mileage is quite high. So that's really important that the grid and the transport system, they communicate. For private users, it can be incentives, as I said, to say, okay, if you want to charge now, the price will be very high. If you charge 2 hours later, it's going to be lower because the expected power demand is lower. But for buses or taxis, we need particular measures to make sure that they only charge when there's enough power. So really the grid and the transport system, they have to communicate. This is most important to make this work.
Julian, let me draw your attention to the whole issue of charges. As you may very well know, users do have concerns about the availability of chargers near their homes and offices, workplaces.
Based on my experience, there's always 2 issues that I face. So the first one is reliability. So you go to a charging station, it's available, it's great. When I start to try and make the payment with the app, it doesn't work. So that's one issue. The second issue is, I completely agree with what Dr. Tobias just said. I think we need to have a little bit of what I would call smart off-peak charging. This way we can actually offload your peak hours 6 to 10 p.m. Queue is not something that people or Singaporeans will want. I don't want to queue up. I don't want to queue to charge my car. I don't want to queue to even buy my food, I want to finish work, head back home, find a lot, it's there, it's working, and that's what I want.
I think there's a technology issue also here. Maybe, I don't know, James, what do you feel about that issue? Maybe there are better chargers in the pipeline being researched.
For BYD, if you look at China recently announced the implementation of a mega fast charge. We talk about less than 10 minutes to have a full charge of the vehicles. So I hope that this one will come in pretty soon to Singapore. We will work together to make sure this is done. That will turn around the whole situation. It's going to be a normal charging kind of experience as compared to the traditional ICE. So that kind of anxiety, that kind of inconvenience cost will be eliminated. And I hope that will boost out the people to buy BEV soon.
If I may chip in this issue of charging, number one, how I see is that the technology has changed very quickly over the last 5 years. And I think that technology will continue to evolve. And if you talk about 10, 15 years ahead, well, it's quite an open question, right? So that's number one. Number two is, in fact, even the battery is continuing to get better, denser, and then giving us better range. Dr. Tobias talked about Singapore is a perfect place because we don't quite have a range anxiety unless you drive to JB and all. And so from our data, on average, the vehicle typically clock about 50 kilometers or thereabout. And so if you look at a typical vehicle with a range of, say, 400, well, you will likely look at 1 to 2 charge, depending on the charging behavior. And so charging infrastructure have to bear in mind these very good technology advances that will come. So that's one. Second, Julian also mentioned about commuter experience, and that is what we are seeing. There are quite different kind of charging behavior even coming up today. So under our EV Charging Act, we require the charging operators to share with us the data so that we can do better resource planning, so that we don't have too many chargers out there that is not used, but we make sure that we know where are the chargers so that we can deploy them quickly. And so with that in mind, the charging behavior will also react according to price. For example, if charging operators impose an idling charge, that will be a very different kind of experience. Some prefer to have very quick charge, but some others actually prefer to have the time, enough time to do grocery shopping. Some prefer to leave the car overnight so that they don't need to go back and move the car and so on. So we're seeing different kind of behavior. And we are doing a workshop to tease out what are the prevalent kind of charging behavior and how could we collectively work towards one that have good resource optimization.
I can see it's kind of a complex matrix kind of things, you know, where how technology is going to evolve.
That's right.
And then what do you address first? And then suddenly once you've addressed it. But Tyron, you meet a lot of people from the industry, and that's from the ground level, from policymakers and all. Is there any likelihood of charging infrastructure being a bottleneck?
In Singapore, I would say education is actually to the users is the biggest, I would say, hurdle right now. Let me give you an example. We may have a 480 kilowatt charger, but then can the CMS system of the car handle 480 kilowatts? The maximum charge of certain vehicles only goes up to maybe 80 to 150 kilowatts. Some do 300. But yet the owners don't understand that, hey, I'm putting in 480 kilowatts. Why didn't the car charge like in 10 minutes? These are the things owners have to understand now that with EVs, technology is part of it. It's no longer about just putting in 60 liters of petrol and going X distance. It's now about knowing the type of vehicle you have, with the equipment is involved, the battery size, what type of management system you have in which you can take the maximum voltage from like an AC charger to a DC charger. Even going forward for the grid, in the next couple of years, besides buses, a big issue for myself when I'm looking at is actually for commercial vehicles, because for normal passenger vehicles, we're looking at small, tiny batteries, so maybe about 50, 60 kilowatts or more. A hauler truck does one at 500 kilowatts. And I have actually been looking at with our garbage trucks in Singapore, which are EVs, and seeing how they charge. It's going to be an interesting next 5 years in which we have to get fast charging available, and that the grid has to catch up with it, because passenger vehicles, public transportation on one side, what happens when you got 100 or 1,000 hauler trucks with 500 kilowatt kilowatt batteries charging at the same time? These are batteries which are even bigger than the bus batteries. And this is going to be very interesting. But adding on to that, I think that the infrastructure here in Singapore, actually, we have caught up with a lot of countries. We actually lead the way in terms of government support for EVs. I think the only two countries I can think of would be Norway and China. And with saying that, actually, for a tiny country, we have done a fantastic job right now. But going forward, we do need the education part more, to know, so that the consumers know what type of EVs they're buying and then how to use them.
That calls for a totally separate round of discussions.
Oh, yes.
But let's move on to another public concern issue, and that has to do with safety standards. Now, incidents have happened elsewhere, maybe not here, but the reality is Singapore's hot. There are concerns about what could happen at night, right? So what are some of the measures we could think of to alleviate such concerns?
Yes. In a way, vehicle fires, even battery fires, is unfortunately for Land Transport Authority, we are fairly familiar with it, because in terms of ICE vehicle fires, we do have some. Every year we have about 200 or so. And if you look at small battery fires, we are talking about the personal mobility devices. Unfortunately, we also encounter a few. And so with this experience, we are very mindful that safety is an area we have to pay a lot of attention to. And so what we have done on our side, the authority side, is number one, in terms of the charger, we have a regime where we do a type approval. We want to make sure that the charger is compliant to the standards and that these are the chargers that is being used in Singapore. So at the charging end, we want to make sure that these are all kind of gone through safety review and all. So that's number one. Second is also that in our EV Charging Act, we actually stipulated that there should be no charging of those battery that is taken out, for example, if you are talking about e-motorcycle at home, all these charging should be done integrated with the platform. And so that is second. And we also work very closely with SDF, our counterpart, to look at what is the protocol in responding to EV battery fires. I must first say that we have very, very few EV fires. And some of those are not even EV battery fires. It's just fires in the electric vehicles, right? And last year we have 4, and that's why I say not all are battery fires. But we are mindful of that. And tapping on Tyron's point, it is not just about policies. It's also about first educating our first responder what to deal with it, how to deal with it. We work with the industry to come up with what we call a NASP certification. Basically, is to train the technicians to be savvy and to know how do you deal with a battery electric vehicles. Which are the wires that you should be mindful of, and you shouldn't just cut without knowing what that is. So safety in terms of the people handling the electric vehicles is also an area that we want to pay attention, including what kind of equipment we equip them with, fire blanket, gloves, and so on. So it's a constant work, I feel, to make sure that safety is taken care of. But I think a large part is also in terms of education and making sure that we stay always ahead with whatever technology we bring in. We are always making sure that safety is not compromised at all.
James, this must be a big issue for you at BYD
Yes,
as well.
Yes.
So how are you trying to ensure that we're always one level above concerns?
Relating to safety, I think in today's number, BYD is being the almost 50% of the battery electric vehicles in Singapore is under BYD brand. We have many rounds with the authorities to look into the safety. So I think the authorities really understand, and they are very professional to upkeep the safety. And we have done a lot of procedure with them to make sure that everything is upkeep according. And I really admire the professionalism of the government to see every angle they would try to cover. I think it is a very good system. So, but there's still things that I think is of concern to us, because comparing to the traditional ICE, is because BEV especially is a high tension electric vehicles concern. So based on these factors, illegal modification is always a concern. Whether is it going to be ICE or BEV, but I would say that BEV will be a more serious consideration. So we have to be very careful. Every time when customer buy our product, we have to say, okay, please do not modify by an unauthorized third party. This is concern, and it's really a concern. Other than modification, illegal modification, we are talking about the illegal repair by an unauthorized repairer. So that is also a concern, because when you go into accidents, there will be a tendency to look at the wiring system, to look at have proper procedure to get it fixed up. So if you are not getting the right procedure, there will be a possibility that fire will be caught. So I think this is the thing that we are working with the authority very closely. For example, it is very different with those IC vehicles in terms of when the vehicle need to be repaired. The insurance company will get a third party, authorized third party to get it done. So I think we are talking to the relevant authority to look at the authorizations of the right repairer for all these group of electric vehicles. I think these are the things that we should fix it properly to make sure that eventually the vehicles on the road for BEVs are all safe. Other than that, I think everything is perfect. Everything is aligned and safe to go. If you look at the statistics numbers, in fact, what Wee Shann says is correct. Fire case from battery is minimum. In fact, if you look at IC, it's more than that, much more than that.
Julian, I want to draw you in on another consumer concern. So the long-term economics about owning an EV do remain kind of uncertain. There are questions about depreciation, resale value, COE renewal. What do you have to say to that?
I think at this stage, battery is the main concern when it comes to depreciation. From what I understand, we are lacking one thing at this point in time, and that is a single trusted standard of battery degradation to actually test to see the health of the battery. Of course, All these can be tested, the state of health of the battery can be tested via the management systems. OEMs, unfortunately, has got different standards from one OEM to another. What we do need is one strict standard. And whether or not this data is easily accessible to third parties and buyers. Because if it's not, there'll be two things, right? Dealers will price in risk rather than accurate depreciation, or at least accurate pricing. The other one, buyers will then have to be uncertain. And once you're uncertain, they will not buy an EV, or at least buy a used EV. So that's the depreciation part. As it comes for COE, well, it's anybody's guess.
Maybe just to add on what
Yes.
Julian said, actually, we have a set of going to implement very soon, is that to upkeep the scrap value, to make sure that depreciation is being controlled for BYD vehicles, we're going to set up an authorized, very soon, an authorized pre-owned car agent.
Okay.
To make sure that the second-hand car, the pre-owned cars, will be properly checked. The battery are vetted with SOH to make sure that we will make known to the second-hand buyer what is the SOH for that, and we do a proper check to make sure that the health of this vehicle is improper. So to give confidence and assurance that it's a pre-owned vehicle, but it's in very good conditions. So this is one thing that we're going to do. And there's another program that we are looking into, it is to look at the second life. Not many people have confidence to look at renewal of COE after 10 years.
Yes.
So I'm really looking into it to say that, okay, if BYD is able to come up with a system to look at, we determine a battery cost by end of 10 years. It's an option for you, you want to renew, we change a wholesale battery for you, then at this specific cost, and it's up to you whether you want to renew. That will give people more confident assurance that, okay, if the condition of the vehicle is well upkept, I can save money to renew the COE. I think that is a perfect solution that we're working on now.
Can I add on something
Yes,
to
of
that?
course.
So just to add something simple, now it's 2026. We're coming about to the first 10-year mark for some of the EVs already. So the first generation of, let's say, some of the models on the road, they have actually started looking into renewing their COE because the state of health of their batteries are actually not nearing even 85%, and this is after 10 years. And these owners of these vehicles are actually very happy with their current EVs and don't see why not to actually just renew it. On the resale part, I can say safely that it's getting better. Over the past 2 years, it has changed a lot. The market has changed. We have more people looking towards used EVs now.
Tobias, let me ask you, given the pace at which technology is changing and the pace of change itself, should we really be preparing in terms of infrastructure for today, or should we already be thinking about infrastructure for tomorrow?
We should keep preparing for today, definitely. Again, we shouldn't rush it. But of course, we can think a few steps ahead. We talked a little bit about using chargers, and I think charger hogging can be an issue. Somebody parks there and then just leaves. So I have this thought in my mind: you have autonomous vehicles, and they could sort of organize, themselves to make sure that every vehicle gets a bit of charge and then moves away from the charger. There's a lot that can be done. So we should have these things in mind. Again, connection of transport and power system, how we can optimize this. But Singapore is on track. We don't have to rush things, but we have to keep a few things in mind that will come in the future, like autonomous vehicles, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at how fast EVs have come about, I mean, the pace of transformation has been quite rapid. So one is excited about what more is going to come. But James, tell me, how will AI integration spell more benefits for users in the coming years?
Well, I think AI is definitely a technology that we should work together with. In fact, our BYD vehicles already have AI elements. So we have our auto parking, we have our ADAS, we have anything relating to safety. Many new models are coming in with all this function very soon. All right, so I think this is AI is definitely one that we should leverage on to make sure that it will convenience and make it better use for our users. And definitely BYD will make full use of it.
So Tyron, when do you think EVs will become the norm in Singapore?
Wow, that's a very big question. I would say with full adoption, we're on track, but we'll at least be more than 1 decade away, at least more than 15 years. Before you see about 90, I would say close to 98 adoption, 98%. Getting nearer to 100%, but to get 100%, it's a challenge. I think LTA will have a big challenge for
Unless
that.
the government mandate. It's 100%.
Yes.
Yes.
For some reason, people in Singapore seem to be more optimistic. So our survey is showing that EVs could well become the norm anytime from 2030 to 2030.
Oh, yes.
That's,
Allow me to share an idea. When I spoke to one of the students recently, I said, "What's your dream if you own an EV?" So her idea was this: 11:30 at night, I'm hungry. I just go into my EV, use autonomous driving, go to KFC, take away, and then at the same time, after I pick up my KFC, I don't just wait there. I'm driving. The car is actually driving me home while I'm eating my KFC in the car. And she wants to do that in the next 5 years. Or in the morning when she's going to work, she wants to be able to do her makeup in the car while going to work, while the car is driving her autonomously to work.
For that to happen, I have the infrastructure in mind. What, according to you, is the hardest part of the puzzle to solve as far as infrastructure is concerned?
One of the areas we are mindful of is the local demand. So there's one thing to look at whether the grid could provide for the charging, but it's another to talk about the specific location, whether these are, demand more than supply and all those. And what we also have to be mindful that the EV charging operators will also need to look at a business proposition for it. Today, the utilization of the chargers is probably around 10% on average, right? It is still, so on one hand, we want to make sure that there are very good charger infrastructure available. We have rules, licensing conditions that require them to maintain their chargers and make sure that they're available and serviceable. But at the same time, it is not so easy to tackle the local demand because the local demand are actually very dynamic. This week, it could be that. A few months later, it could well change a little bit. And so that, I would say, trying to balance that at the national level is going to be something that we have to look at very carefully.
Julian, so just listening to everyone, what do you think, do you see EVs becoming fully part of the Singapore family experience, or would it just be something like a tech gadget that fascinates people?
I think moving forward, as of now, it's already a mainstream family option. However, I believe that reliability breeds confidence. When people are confident of the products, confident of brands, confident of the models, confident of the technology, confident even with the battery, they will continue to encourage electrification. However, the moment reliability falls, I think it can go back to gadget status very quickly. So from my point of view, I think success is boring because it also means that chargers are working, but failures can be very noisy. You will have a lot of social media, anger, you will have a lot of noises, you have a lot of complaints. So I think it's always back to the basics, which is reliability breeds confidence.
And what does success or failure look to you?
Everyone is happy with the electric vehicle. They don't have to really think about that anymore, that it's different from like refueling with petrol. This is success. It's just normal.
I think I see success slightly differently. I agree with you, absolutely. But I think success would be more than 60 to 70% of new car sales would be EVs. I'm not just talking passenger cars.
That should happen soon.
Taxi, PHVs, fleet, commercial vehicles should also be electrified by then. That would be what success would look like.
I agree.
What about you, Wee Shann? What would success, you've got the big picture, where we are heading.
Indeed, I think the success to us is having many of the vehicles, at least battery electric vehicles, they are well serviced and that they are all safe. And in fact, I think boring is good because boring means that things work. They don't need to bother about it, and they can get around doing other things that they have to do.
James, do you have an idea of what would success mean for you?
Success is when your children know about how electric vehicles works,
Okay.
when all the specialist technicians know how to easily repair electric vehicles, then you'll be a success because it is part of the economic, part of the lifestyle. Everybody will enjoy riding EVs. So I think it's not far too away. Just now, Mr. Tyron said that we are talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
I think to me, I find that now we are about 56%. We are already in late majority. By 80%, I think we should be about 2 to 3 years' time. Then I think you'll see a lot of mass EV pre-painter in Singapore.
Final thoughts, Tyron?
Well, it's a success for EVs, going back to that. I have two very simple dreams for that. One is when I'm driving on the road, I no longer smell the diesel fumes from the tipper truck in front of me. Second one would be in maybe 5 years, let's say 5 years, I can walk down Orchard Road in the evening and take a deep breath without having to breathe in any CO2 emissions. Simple dream, and I think it's achievable.
Thank you, everyone. There were some really great insights in there. And to our viewers, thank you for making time to watch this session of In Perspective. Do keep watching In Perspective. We'll be bringing you fresh insights, real perspectives, and meaningful dialogues in the months to come.